Thank you for joining in today's webinar on how do you manage the compensatory leave. We are ideally going to go through a little or small changes that we've done with regards to the new time off platform that we've released, whether it's with regards to the new policies or the new accrual rules that we have released, or it's with regards to the new validation rules that we have come up with. And then we will go a little more deeper, or we'll talk a little more in detail about the time off in lieu or your compensatory leave setup and functioning all about. Right. So everything today that we're going to talk about is available on the new time off platform, or the new V3 platform as we call it. In case you don't have the latest version of time off available with you, we have mostly upgraded all our customers to the latest version. But if your system still seems to be on the older platform, which you will see in a bit on how to differentiate, then you can call up the Replicon support team and ask them to upgrade you to the latest version so that you can make use of all the new things that we have come up with. Right, like I said, your lines have been muted, so feel free to go ahead and chat with me with regards to any questions. We will have a question and answer session towards the end of the webinar for sure. Okay, so to start with, we'll just quickly have a look at all the challenges that are faced today by the businesses. So anybody who has a manual process around managing time off can face a lot of challenge, of course. The multi-location companies, typically, they have complex time off policies. They need to set up policy for every region, employee type, or they have to ensure that they are followed by both compliance and liabilities. But this can be a little challenging, as you have to end up sometimes having separate systems and processes for each local office. And in some cases, you have to calculate and track time off manually via spreadsheets. Especially when I'm talking about time off in lieu or compensatory leave, or TOL, as we will commonly call it in today's webinar. This is an alternative, of course, to overtime payments that can add a fair bit of complexity. So instead of paying overtime for additional hours of work, and you go ahead and just offer hours or more as a paid holiday further down the line, right? So with TOIL, the businesses in business, you now need to manage the additional pieces to get the policy and application right, including what is allowed, when can the TOIL be taken, what is the expiry date. All these things have to be tracked by you in the in different systems as of today, right? There are some challenges that you face, or why these challenges matter on such. Basically, it is because you have higher labor cost involved with this. You will have additional overheads who will be maintaining and going ahead with calculating the hours that have to be accrued or that have to be managed. You have increase in liability, of course, and then you have these potential penalties that you may have to face with, because it's all the manual work that you have to do, and you end up with some or the other mistake, or you have to go ahead and have those potential penalties. Automation, of course, you cannot overstate it. With an automated way of managing the time off, all the HR people, they need to do this, as we said, of policy one. All they do is set up the policy once, and then it's self-service. It's written out, it's rule-based, it can be consistently applied in the workforce, and since it's automated, there's this reduced liability risk and there's reduced that overhead cost that you have. So there can be complex policies, right? For example, creating or applying or managing TOIL can be completed automatically, including your configurable workflows specific to this type of compensatory leave. Or if your business operates in cities with paid sick leave regulations, and it requires your organization to give 1 hour to every 30 or 40 hours that people are working, then that's the kind of automation, that's the kind of setup that you would want to look for. So of basically automating the time off is that all of this is going to reduce the amount of manual time that you spend tracking and calculating your time off. It's going to thereby very significantly minimize the admin overhead. So, the increased visibility makes it very easier to check in on the current and the future liability to ensure that it doesn't pile up and it keeps the cost low. So this is why people, want to go in for automation as in today. The near elimination of errors due to the manual input will ensure that all of your time off data is accurate, reducing the compliance risk very significantly. It's also now easier to consistently apply these policies across your organizations and improve the transparency or the productivity that's there within the organization. Of course, I cannot go ahead and forelook the better scheduling and resource management options that you would have with the time off being booked with the tool. So how Replicon helps? You can now set up the time off and toil leave policies, calculate them regardless of whatever complexity that you have within your organization. It can be conditional based. For example, you're calculating time off based on the hours that people have worked in your organization. You have time off policies for each region. You can have it for employee types. You can have it automatically calculate the accruals, the carryovers, the resets, the toil, the expiry. Everything can be done automatically. And all of this is done using just one policy. So it's all in the single platform. Plus, employees and supervisors can check their balances or the team balances and accrual calculations and use reports and dashboards for a better visibility of all of this. Okay, so we'll less to the presentation because we have more to show you in the system of what we've come up with. So I'm going to get into the demo right away and show you what are the new things that we have come up with on our time off platform, and then probably I'm going to show you what are the toil configuration that you would have to look forward to. Okay, so I am now logged into the Replicon instance, and let's quickly take you through the new things that we have come up with regards to the policies on our new platform. I'm going to click on the add time off policy, add time off type, and as you all know that you can set up policies at the time off type level, and you can set up policies at the user level. So if you set up at the time off type level, which I'm going to do right away right now, this policy is going to be effective for all the new users that are being added to your system. So there is a reset to default button available at the user level, which I'll show you in a bit, that will help you have these policies get applied to the current or the existing users in one go. So these policies that you define here are basically for the new users. But of course, you can define the policies at the end user level as well. So as an administrator, you can go ahead and do that as well. Let me quickly go ahead and click on the add button here and add policy with regards to this person or this time of type that I have in here. Now, at time of type level or at the policy level, the changes that we have made, let's start with the starting policy rule. Now, if you remember, or if you've been using the time off version of Replicon, you would know that historically we have had the options to go ahead and set the balance to something, or you've had an option to go ahead and have the balance carried over from the previous policy to the current one. So both of these were available in the past. Now what we've added as a new option is this option called starting balance set to with expiry. So if you are, somebody who's like for example, some of the companies walk up to us and say that we have one kind of leave that is awarded to a person for some reason, and that leave is only for this year. It's not going to be carried over. It's not going to be available. It's just available for this year, and I want it to expire within this year. So all I can do is set a balance to something and then set an expiry date. So this, whatever I've set to, it just gets expired, and you don't have the time of type booking available anymore. So that's what we've introduced right now. We've introduced a couple of new accrual rules with regards to the policies that you have. The first one, of course, is called accruals based on hours worked. Now, this is something new that we've come up with. If you have X number of hours worked, then you accrue a certain number of time of hours for yourself. Now, this accrual is based on the timesheet period. So if your timesheet period is weekly, if it's bi-weekly, it's monthly, semi-monthly, whatever be your timesheet period, within that timesheet period, if you have worked 30 hours, like as you can see on your screen, then you will accrue 1 hour of that time of type. So if you go ahead, say it's a monthly timesheet, you have worked, say about, or it's a bi-weekly timesheet, you've worked about 60 hours, then you'll accrue 2 hours for that time of type. So as and when you work 30 hours, you get 1 complete hour of time of type for yourself, and that's the accrual that you can set it up for. The accrual rule that we have introduced is with regards to expiry. So you want to accrue something yearly, but you do want that accrued balance to expire with time. That's possible through this option called yearly accrual with expiry. So you can set it up here that how much am I supposed to accrue yearly, and whatever I've accrued, when is it going to get expired? So that's what you can choose up here with this expiry rule, with this accrual rule. Now, while we were talking about the accruals, we've also introduced something new when it comes to the limitation rules. So here you have all the resets that happen for your policy. So for a new one, we've introduced this new reset rule called yearly carryover with expiry. Let me quote an example for this. So say, for example, I have to carry over a maximum of 5 days every year from my previous year. And I also accrue on January 1st about 20 days. So as on January 1, I have about 25 days, 5 carried over from previous year and 20 that I have accrued this year. But whatever I've carried over, they are only going to be available till my fiscal year ends. The day that my fiscal year ends, I don't want these 5 hours to be available anymore. The user should carry over with the 20 hours that they have accrued. So for this 3 months that you have, January, February, March, or what your fiscal year, I want these 5 days to be available and be used. If they don't use it, they lose it. They just have that expired. So that's something that you can set up, or this is just an example scenario. You can, of course, set up more scenarios based on your organization's requirement. So you can set those carryover with expiry rules up here in this section. What we've introduced is with regards to the validation rule. Now, I'm sure that if you've used Replicon's time off platform, you are well aware of this validation rule called overdraw limit, where you set up an overdraw limit and a person can only go up to that limit in negative. So if I set it up to 0, a person cannot go into negative. Set it up to 2, a person can go up to -2, and so on. So overdraws could have been set for each time, time the balance ends and you are at 0 or so on. But now we've introduced a new validation rule in addition to that, which is called prevent overdraw at the end of the year. I have an accrual set up where I accrue quarterly, and for this quarter I accrued about 16 hours, which I apparently used. Now in February I do want to take a time off, but I'm not able to take a time off because I'm at 0. With this rule now, if you set up the overdraw limit to be at the end of the year, so the system checks that this person's going to accrue quarterly, so eventually by the end of the year, he's going to have positive balance. So it's going to let me go ahead and book the time off. So till my balance reaches 0 by the end of the year, I can still go ahead and have the bookings done whenever or however I want it to be. So I can set the prevent overdraw at the end of the year validation up here. The other validation rule that we've added in the system is the preventing of the time of use of the time of type during the probationary period. Now, there are people who join in your organization, and there are time of types that are very specific to your permanent employees, and you don't want people who are in the probationary period to go ahead and take that time of type during their probationary period. You want that to be taken only when their probation ends. So this is something that will help you with that. So if you have a start date for a user, you set up what's your probationary period, and then post that is when these people will be able to take a time off using that time of type. Once when you take a time off during your probationary period, it's going to give you an error. It's going to just say that you are in your probationary period, you cannot go ahead and book this time of type right now. So that's something that we've added for you in terms of the validation rules and in terms of accruals and limitation rules, so you can make use of that as and when you want. Well, at the user level, like I was saying, all the policies that you set at the time of type level, it's pretty simple and straightforward to assign it to an existing user. You go over to the time of section, you have this option called reset to default. So you can just click on reset to default and you can just go ahead and have your time of type policies get applied at the user level directly. Okay, now coming back to administration and talking about we have this webinar for, which is time off in lieu. Now, time off in lieu in our older version of timesheet timesheet and time off was taken care of by this time off type called banked time off. Now, this banked time off was not configurable. You couldn't create a new one, you couldn't edit the things, or you couldn't configure it based on your requirement. You had the banked time off type and you had to put in your bank hours into that. So now what we came up with is something that you could configure based on your requirement. You decide how you want your toil to be configured. You decide how many time off types do you want to make available so that people can choose where my accrued time would go up to, and you decide how these accrued hours happen. So everything's configurable now. But this is available with two things. One, that you have to be on our latest timesheet version. When I say timesheet version, it's the custom timesheet template that you have. So if you go over to the timesheet template, you say you're adding a new timesheet template. If you have the timesheet format drop-down available, you have to have this option called the custom timesheet format. If you don't have this custom timesheet format within your system, you can get in touch with your Replicon support team. They can enable that for you. If you don't see the timesheet format field at all, like this field not available for you at all, then you're already on the latest version of the timesheet format, so you don't have to worry at all. But if you see this, you need the custom timesheet format option available within this drop-down. In addition to that, you have to be on the latest version of the time off platform, of course, and that will give you the access to time off in lieu. To configure the time off in lieu, one thing that is very, very important is the overtime rule, or the pay rules as we call it in the latest version. You have to have pay rules assigned to yourself. You have to have pay rules for yourself, and you can then go ahead and have your overtime calculated, and whatever overtime is being calculated can be then converted into toil. So it's very important that you have payrolls in your within your system, and you have payrolls assigned to the user. So the first requirement that you have with regards to toil setup and functioning. The second requirement that is very important is that in the timesheet template that you configure, there's a timesheet UI called time off in lieu. This UI has to be added in your timesheet template. So once you add this, the toil will be calculated and it will show you how many hours have you received as part of toil. So that's part of the configuration that you have to mandatorily have in order to have your toil work. Okay, the other thing that you have to go ahead with, so let me go back here. You have this option called time off in lieu that's available in here. Now, time off in lieu, if you don't see this option, though you're the latest version of the time off platform, it's probably because in your admin permission you don't have the time off in lieu option checked. So make sure that's checked, and then you will see the time off in lieu option available here. I'm going to click on time off in lieu up here, and let me go ahead and remove everything so I can show you how you start with. Okay, so first option that you have here with regards to time off in lieu is this option which says pay codes eligible for time off in lieu. Now these pay codes, what you've mentioned here, have to match the pay codes that you've configured in your overtime rule or in your pay rule. Because when the timesheet calculates the overtime based on those pay codes, then those pay codes will calculate, or the overtime hours that have been calculated will then convert into toil. So it's extremely important that the pay codes that you choose within the toil section match your payroll pay codes. So I'm going to click on add pay code. I will have the list of pay codes that have been added into my system, and I can choose from any one of these. For example, overtime is one of the pay codes that I have, and then I have double time that's been added into my system. So I can have these configured and added into the toil here. Now with every pay code that you add into the system, you will see this drop down showing up. The drop has two options. One is called allow users to elect the number of hours. The option allows the users to choose how many hours do they want to get paid for out of the total overtime hours, and how many hours do they want to convert into toil. So that division of hours can be done by the user himself while he's having his timesheet in front of him, and so you can give this option by choosing the first option in here. Now, when you choose the first option, you next have two radio buttons available, which are called choose the multipliers. In this, you have two options available. The first one's called users choose the multiplier on the timesheet. So I'm an end user. I decide that I have 8 overtime hours in total. I want 4 to be paid for. I convert 4 into toil. With the first radio button checked, the system will also ask me if I want or how many time of hours do I want for the 4 hours that I am planning to convert into toil. So I can put in a number as an end user there saying, hey, for the 4 hours I'm converting to toil, I want 8 hours of time off to be deposited for me. So that multiplier or the number of hours that should be deposited as part of toil for the number of hours that I've worked across can be decided by the end user with the first radio button. Second radio button allows the administrator to choose the multiplier. So here you don't give a choice to the end user. You say, okay, end user decides how many hours does he want to get paid for, how many he's converting into toil, and for the number of hours that he's converting into toil, choose multiplier and give him the number of time of hours directly. So I've chosen the multiplier as 1, as you see here. If I have chosen 4 hours to be converted to toil, I'll have 4 hours of time off deposited into my time off type. So that's the multiplier that you decide as an administrator. With the second option that you have on this drop down, it's called automatically convert all the eligible hours to time off. So irrespective of how many overtime hours you have, you don't get paid for any overtime hours. All your overtime hours get converted into toil. When I choose this, of course, my first one's going to go grayed out because now I can't choose how many hours I want to convert into toil. I will only have an option to configure what's the multiplier. So when automatically you're converting the total number of hours into toil, how many hours should be deposited into the time of accrual? That's something that you can decide as an administrator. So that's all that you can do with regards to the pay code eligibility. Now come down, you have the next section which is called time off type eligible for time off in lieu. Now here you can decide how many time off types do you want the users to choose from where he can put his deposited hours into. You can choose one time off type. If you've chosen one time off type, it's going to go always over to that time off type. You can choose multiple time off types. Like for example, there are some organizations who would want to give a choice to the user to choose whether they want to deposit hours into vacation time type or PTO time off type. It's their choice. So that's something that you can do with a section called add time of types eligible for time off in lieu. You have all your time off types available and listed out. You can just go ahead and choose, say for example, I'm going to choose vacation and I'm going to choose comp time, or I can choose multiple time off types, and then at the timesheet level, which I'll show you in a bit how it looks like, at the timesheet level you can choose which time off type should my hours get deposited to. That's an option available. Coming to the third section, which is called time off in lieu deposits. Now, we recommend, or most of the organizations want, that whenever the timesheet gets approved, only then the overtime hours should get converted into the time off or bank hours. That's an option given to you. We have that configuration available under this section. We have 2 options available. One is called once timesheet is approved, which is the basic that everybody would want to. But we also have an option called as time is entered. As and when people are entering time, as and when the overtime gets calculated, the time of hours will keep getting deposited in your time of balance. Now, this is something that's useful if your organization is using, say, a monthly timesheet. It's a month-long timesheet, and of course, you don't want people to wait for the month end and the timesheet to get approved, and then you get the time off in lieu for your overtime hours. So if that's the case in your organization, you can probably choose the second one, but remember that the second one is a little risky to use because what if people have added the extra hours and they have the time off accumulated and they've already booked the time off using those hours, and then they go ahead and reduce the timesheet hours. Because then you will have to take care of that audit, and you will have to make sure that that doesn't happen. So to keep a tab on such things, we have the second option available, which is the once timesheet is approved option. So you make sure that once the timesheet gets approved, you get the time off in lieu, and then you can't change anything on your timesheet. So that's how you can configure the entire time off in lieu in the system in here. Now I had configured, I'll probably quickly go back in again and show you how I configured. This is the most complex scenario that you have. So you have, I have two pay codes, which is overtime and comp time based on my payroll. I have users choose the multiplier. I also have users choose the number of hours that they want to convert into toil. I have around 4 time off types that I can choose from, and I have the deposit time off in lieu as time is entered. So I go to my timesheet. My payroll says that once I have 40 hours, or anything above 40 hours is going to be the overtime. I go ahead and enter, say, 10 more hours for Friday. So now I have 48 hours. I will either wait for the timesheet to refresh, or I'll click on this refresh icon, and I'll have my toil section coming up here. This is the toil UI that we included. Now I have the option to elect how many hours do I want to get paid for and how many do I want to convert into toil. I will have this box here. So I have a total of 8 hours extra. I say, okay, I want 4 hours to be paid for and I want 4 hours to be converted to toil. So I have the option here. Next, I have the option set to user chooses the multiplier. So I have another box here, which is called deposit hours, where I can specify that, hey, for the 4 hours I want for toil, I want 8 hours to be deposited into my time off balance. Since I had multiple time off types chosen, I can go ahead and choose which time off type should I pick up in order to have these deposited hours going into. Now, if you have the multiplier set by yourself, if you are the administrator and you've set the multiplier, the only difference that's going to be is at rate is going to show you the multiplier that the administrator has set. For example, 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, whatever you had set, at rate will show you that multiplier here. And this deposit hour box is not going to be available for editing. It's going to directly multiply and place your hours there. But if you have multiple time off types, then you can just go ahead and choose between them. One more thing that I want to bring up to your notice, in time off in lieu configuration, if you have chosen all the hours to be automatically converted into time off in lieu, then you will not have the option to go ahead and choose the time off types that you want to put these hours into. Then the system is going to pick up the first time off type that you have chosen in the configuration. So for example, let me go over to administration. Let me open time off in lieu here. So here I have comp time as the first time off type that I've chosen. So the moment if I've chosen the automatic option of automatically having the overtime get converted, then I'll have all those hours go over to the comp time automatically. So that's going to happen with regards to your time off in lieu calculation. Now, let's say, for example, I have my time off in lieu calculated here, and remember that I had set it up as time is entered, so I don't have to approve my timesheet. To check for any user how many time or how many time off in lieu has he accrued, you just have to go over to the user's profile, go over to time off. Let's see, I deposited into, let me see, time off type that I deposited my bank time into. Okay, personal leave. So I'm going to go to personal leave, I'm going to click on view transaction, and I will have this line show up, which is called accrual in lieu of pay, and it will specify the timesheet period, and it will tell me how many hours got deposited. Now, actually, in addition to that, if you have chosen to only have the hours accrued after the timesheet gets approved, then this line will show up only once the timesheet gets approved. Before that, this line is not going to show up because balance is not added to the or the hours not been added to the balances yet. All right. So that's how the time off in lieu is going to work on the whole, and the configuration is going to be set up here. So we have listed out all the webinars that we are upcoming with. The next webinar that we're coming next week up with is managing projects cost and delivery. So that's something that we are coming up with. We'll also send an intercom message like we did for this one. You can go ahead and register for them if you want to. We're all coming up with the Cloud Clock webinar that we plan to show you how our Cloud Clocks work and why you need a Cloud Clock in your organization. So we are coming up with that as well for the next week. So these are the two that are coming up. And then we have more plans which are coming up, which you will see as coming soon. So you will have these register links all the way on this website all the time. Plus all the other ones that you have already or that have already gone ahead or finished. We have the on-demand webinars here, and you can just go ahead and have look at all the older webinar recordings, or you can hear the older webinar recordings on this page. So we list out all the recordings here. You can go to these webinars if you would like to at any point of time. So if we don't have any more questions, thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. We hope to see you for the next webinars and hope we were informative. Thank you everyone for joining in for the webinar. Thanks a lot.